work that our physical plant has done. There was an interesting, I've watched much too much TV. All of us probably did, and probably saying, why didn't I do something more productive? But I have to be honest with you, I watched too much. And there was an interesting person who came on, a workman, in charge of cleaning the streets of Lexington. And some women said, well, why didn't you put salt on the streets? And he said, because we're stupid. Well, obviously a man who has gone to, all the way through the stages knew that you should put, if you could get good work. Some of you might say, well, why aren't certain things clean? Well, it's not because we're stupid. Believe me, our people worked hard and long, and it's treacherous still out there. As you know, the warming has put a little moisture between your feet and the ice. But if you see any of these folks, they were out there the day it was 10 below. And I was concerned about this because I said something to Porter. We don't need to have men out there shoveling in 10 below weather. But many of them did. And so please, if you see them, thank them. Because this is really above and beyond, I think. Well, welcome back. It's nice to have time away from work and hopefully time to rest, to think. But it's good to have that time to kind of rekindle the mind and the spirit. I have a lot to share with you today. And I really struggle on how to approach this message. There's a great deal of information. But it's not only the information I want to share with you, and there's a lot of it, but I would like for each one of you to leave here today kind of embracing the spirit of my message. As usual, my family has provided me with inspiration to organize, hopefully in a clear and simple way, the material that I would like for you to know. I should now at least recognize my spouse sitting out here, my biggest supporter and critiquer, Bonnie, right there. And also 40% of, I represent 40% of the workload and she's 60%. You really got a twofer when you brought us, and she's the biggest side of that twofer. I had the opportunity to be with my immediate family for 5 days in a small home in West Virginia on the ski slopes, which was a humbling experience for this person. In that setting, we had 4 children ages 23 to 31, 3 significant others, females, girlfriends of our sons, Bonnie and me. And it snowed just as hard there as it did here, and it was blizzard conditions. And during these 5 days, Bonnie and I came reacquainted, if you will, with group parenting. We have not had them all together for quite a number of years, as you can tell by their ages. Many of you know our youngest, Jeff, who now lives with us in the President's home, and our daughter, Lori, who commutes, well, who lives in Lexington, but commutes over here quite a bit. For some reason, I don't know. It has to do something with somebody down the athletic department. But she's over here quite a bit. But all of a sudden, we had the other 2 boys, their girlfriends, plus another friend, so 3 girls. And they were our responsibility. You never get out of this parenting, I don't think. Now, I could talk for hours about our experience, and those of you who have older children probably could give similar sorts of talks. But for our purposes here, the experience that was most reinforced while we were there is really something I should have known. If you're an authority figure, and every one of us are authority figures in some setting, and you are that person, and you have that responsibility, there are 3 communication techniques that you just have to use. And one is to be honest, say what you mean, and keep it simple. Believe me, with 7 young adults, these 3 communication rules, I believe, made for a positive experience, because everyone in our family, exactly what I said the first time I came on campus about hats and everything else, is that if people know what's expected of them, you got a better shot at making a positive experience of what could have been possibly not so positive. I'm sure it contributed a great deal to what I considered a positive family experience, and I think all of them want to repeat it. Now, I must be honest with you that repeating might depend upon the fact that Dad paid all the bills. Well, my message to you is simple, but it's very profound, because for once there will be a direct relationship that we have over our future. We have control of what happens to the institution financially in comparison to other institutions. Our funding will depend upon our behavior and the results of our behavior. One agreement of the Higher Education Review Commission, formed by Governor Jones, was consensus of how to fund higher education for the next 2 years. Year 1, some appropriation between 0 and 3%. In all honesty, I think it'll be closer to 0, if not 0. Secondly, in year 2, 95-96, our funding will depend upon our performance on performance-based criteria. And the amount of money that we will receive will depend on how we score. And it could represent, depending upon the economy, from 0 to 5%, depending upon what figure the legislature puts forth. Performance-based indicators were determined from baseline data that were gathered in 1992 and 93 as required by Senate Bill 109, sponsored by Ed Ford. It is known as the accountability legislation. Now, I want to share with you some baseline data for Morehead State University. I want to present the data first and then get into, as all of you are excellent researchers, some of the issues which really don't make a bit of difference. But to at least let you know that I realize that this data is possibly flawed, possibly does not represent what they should know. The fact of the matter, it's what will be used. Glad that's not my bones. The first 4 slides have to do with alumni perception of our institution. The same questions were asked of all alumni of other institutions, and we can get at least a relative idea not only of how we fared, but how other institutions fared. The first one is their satisfaction of instruction. Now, these are alumni. These are graduates, recent graduates in the last, I think it was 5 years. Now, you can see it's fairly high, just so you can get used to reading these graphs. I'll do a little bit more with the first one, and then I'll go through fairly quickly. You can see that we're the 3rd institution over in terms of the bar. By the way, I will provide paper graphics of this to anybody who wants them. All you do is let us know, and we'll make sure you get them. I just didn't want to make 400 copies, and maybe only 5 of you want them. But you can see that, yes, on a whole, most alumni across the state are satisfied with their undergraduate experience, have marked them fairly high, good to excellent. But our relative position in terms of all the other institutions, that we are the lowest of the 6 regionals in terms of this particular measure. A second question was the satisfaction of their preparation, their educational preparation for further educational endeavors to move on to a post-baccalaureate environment. And again, you can see that while all seem to huddle in the 70s, we are again the lowest in terms of this particular measure. The third was their satisfaction of job skills. Did we prepare them to move into the labor market? Again, in this particular one, we were not the lowest. We huddled at fourth, and you can see how other institutions compared in relationship to us. And then the fourth that had to do with at least alumni, their overall perception of instruction. And again, while they all are clustered in the 80s, you can see that, at least comparatively speaking, their perception of us was lower than other perceptions of alumni in their institutions across the state. Now, not only alumni were asked questions, questions were also asked of our most recent graduates, our graduating class of 1992. This one bears a little time to look at and to absorb. Would you recommend this institution to another potential student? And you can see that barely more than half of our students indicated that they would. Now, I'm not making this data up. This is how we fared. And I'm not even going to put any value on it. I just want you to know how that question was answered by our students. And we were significantly the lowest in the state by like institutions. Secondly, the satisfaction of their effectiveness of their high schools. And you can see, and it might have had some relationship to later, they weren't very pleased with their high school experiences either, in terms of preparing them for what met them when they left. Also, they were asked about non-instructional areas. This would be our counseling center and admissions process, I'm assuming, and probably registration and other things that they run up against as they live here. And you can see, again, we were not on the bottom in this particular one, but again, we were certainly in the lower half of other regionals. Also, they were asked about the quality of the instruction that they received as students here. And you can see that roughly 1 out of 3 indicated that they did not fall in the good or excellent category, but fell somewhere below that. Roughly 2/3 did see us as excellent or good. And you can see that, again, unfortunately, we found ourselves at the lowest in comparison to other institutions. Now, employee status, what we found from our alumni again, and this might have some bearing on the perceptions. As all of you know, Eastern Kentucky there's a situation in Eastern Kentucky that full-time employment is hard to come by. There is not a lot of opportunity, and that certainly is reflected in this statistic. You can see full-time employed being in the blue, part-time in the yellow, and you can move yourself up. That, again, we find ourselves, at least on that particular statistic, that our students just are not, and some of that might be by their own choice, not wanting to leave the area, etc. But the fact of the matter is, we have fewer full-time employed recent alums, last 5 years, than most other institutions. A little bit of profile data about ourselves, just comparative. This will let you know, at least in '92, what we look like compared to other Kentucky institutions system-wide, meaning our regionals. And you can see how our workforce is distributed in comparison. The way that is read, is 34.6% of our workforce are defined as faculty, as compared to 27.8% if all the other institutions are put together. And you can see that our profile really does not vary much, which means our distribution of work is pretty much the same as other institutions, like institutions in the state. Also, a self-report item was the instructional hours per week of, again, self-report. This was self-report by you, the number of hours per week involved in instructional activities. And you can see that our profile is not much different than the state as a whole. Again, these visuals are available to you in the paper form if you want them later. This is basically the same data, just with the service component, the research component involved with the instructional component. And you can see the work week goes up considerably, up into the 50s of hours, which I think is an accurate reflection of where most of you would fall in terms of your work activity here. Most people don't believe that. That's an issue we'll talk about in a moment. I believe it. I know it because I watch you and see you every day in the wonderful things you do both on campus and off campus. The last slide of this particular group is an accountability measure of, well, how do our graduates fare on licensure examinations? This is certainly not all the licensure examinations, and we have ups and downs. You know, if you're dealing with small ends, sometimes if just one fails, it has a tremendous impact on a percent. But you can see by looking at this that we are, comparatively speaking, in this particular year, relatively lower than our sister institutions. We have more recent data that shows that this has changed somewhat. And it is one of those up and down things. I can remember for years when I was Vice President for Academic Affairs, we kept getting the highest on the first time passing of the CPA exam. And I bragged on that forever. I mean, I was all over the state talking about how great we were, and then all of a sudden one year we had an aberration, and 2 or 3 people flunked it, and all of a sudden I had to swallow my tongue on the issue. And all of us know that you do have ups and down years as you go along, but this is baseline data. This is what people in the state are looking at this point in time. Now, unfortunately, we didn't, measure as well as I would have guessed, and probably you also. We could debate very easily the appropriateness of these measures, the methodology used, the usefulness of the results, but the simple fact is that our opinion and criticism makes absolutely no difference. What matters is whether or not we improve. I remember once in South Carolina I disagreed with some criteria developed by their Commission on Higher Education, and I had a chance to voice my concern and criticism to then Governor and now Governor Carroll Campbell. And I argued what I thought was the most rational, impassioned speech and persuasiveness to have the governor pay attention to me. And when I finished, the governor just turned to me very calmly and said, "Ron, that dog won't hunt." Well, the meaning was clear. We're not in a bargaining position. There's great frustration between elected officials and university administrators, and probably faculty also, about the role of higher education. We are not a high priority in government. I didn't say that we weren't a high concern, but we're not a high priority in government. And according to survey data, we're not even a very high priority in the populace if you take into consideration their unwillingness to raise taxes to meet the many unmet needs that we constantly tell them. Now, I know from my experience with HERC, the Higher Education Review Commission, that in those meetings I learned from them that we have to be prepared to make do with what we have and to readjust our monies to do what is important and necessary to our mission. Now, I'm going to share with you the criteria by which we will be judged for potential monies the second year of the biennium, because we were able to convince and to negotiate among all the institutions what performance criteria would be used. Now, there were some guidelines from which we had to work, but we did have the ability to place emphasis on these criteria that we think would benefit us in that budgetary process. Now, these criteria upon which we will be judged in 1994 are not debatable. So I suggest that as you look at them, you start thinking about how can we maximize results in our favor. Basically, there are 5 areas in which we will be, all institutions in Kentucky will be judged. There are 100 points that are possible to get a perfect score, and your score will determine how you are funded in the second year of the biennium. You could go no lower than 10 points in any one of the 5 classifications, and you could not exceed 30 in any one of the 5 classifications. Now, we worked hard here with many of you to try to put together at least where we would have at least some advantage in terms of what we would choose. We certainly didn't want to choose something we couldn't be successful in, or make sure at least we would have low numbers by that. The first one is student persistence. We chose only to put 10 in this. We're the first column. We chose only to put 10 in this. You can see how the other institutions did it. EKU or Eastern Kentucky put 12, Northern Kentucky put 10, and so on across the board. We chose to put 2 points on full-time freshmen, their persistence to the second year, full-time black freshmen, community college transfers at a certain level, and year 1-2 retention. I'm sorry, that first one is really first semester, second semester, and year 1, year 2 black students. So we decided to put 2 in each one of these. Now, a lot of these will be worked out in the next 6 to 8 weeks, exactly what the criteria will be. But in the broad brush, these are the categories in which they fall. We're not quite sure exactly what each one meets. In student outcomes, which is another area, you can see that graduation rates of black students, remedial success, and so on, that we chose to put 0 in some of these, mainly because our own baseline data suggests that it would take a major overhaul for us to have the success measures that we thought would be helpful to us. So you can see in this particular one we put 25 points. You can see how they're distributed. As one looks at instructional quality, we chose to put 25 into this one, and you can see that we are strong in our periodic program review. We've done this, I think, very religiously and quite thoroughly. We do compare favorably in our percentage workload of instruction. Again, we're concerned about our licensing exams. So as you can see, we put a little less weight on them. I think that can turn around, but it was a bigger chance than some of the others. In research and research quality, we put 15 points. Namely, we are very strong in our KIRA activities, and we think we can do quite well and show what we've done. And the rest, the non-KIRA, really has to do with public service, and we can document public service in many, many ways in terms of action-oriented research and involvement. This was a concession that we were able to win to combat at least UK and U of L, who have 30 points in these areas because of their ability and their mission, basically their mission to do these sorts of things. And then performance funding measures on campus management. We are a very well managed institution. We do have a good EEO plan, equal opportunity plan. Our institutional support of keeping our buildings up has continually been good. We do have strategic planning that many of you are involved in, and even what we've been doing over the last 6 months with the task forces and the planning is really part of strategic planning. We do have a strong facilities maintenance plan. As you know, I have diverted much of those funds into the teaching environment, into your environment. That's what you're seeing the results of, and that's a direct result, by the way, of my meetings in the departments with many of you, trying to find out really what ticked you off and what really needed to be done. And we have redone some of those monies, and then we'll continue as that goes on. Organizational review, we do it quite often. We're always reviewing almost every position as it becomes vacant, and should it be absolved, should we get rid of it or keep it or whatever. Staff development, we are strong in staff development, and our classroom use rate is average, and we think we can keep the average, which would not lose those points. Well, if you look across the whole state, you can kind of see how we did it and compared to others. I think you'll see that there's a very close relationship in broad categories of how we spread these 100 points. You might be asking yourself, well, what do these 100 points mean? Well, what they mean is the following. That if we can score between 90 and 100, we'll get 100% of whatever they say we're going to get, possibly get. If it's 5%, we'll get all 5%. If we get an 89, we'll get 89% of the whatever percent. If we get 50 points, we'll get 50% of whatever is appropriated. So you can see that we have many things in our own hands, because performance-based really means that we'll be measured on how we perform. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that this approach will make us better and stronger if we can cooperate and be realistic about our institution. Now, I've made a serious commitment to this faculty to bring your salaries at or above Kentucky averages. Over the next few years, I hope that we can reach that goal. Now, there is a plan, a tentative plan developed by a faculty committee, and since they gave their report to me, I have modified it and have yet to have a chance to go back and meet with them to work out the differences that I saw in the plan and what they submitted to me. When there is consensus between us, that plan will be shared with you, which is my way I behave, and I think most of you know that, so that you'll have an opportunity at least to agree or disagree or offer some modification that might be useful. But it is to move us toward that goal of having our salaries at the Kentucky averages. I've even received a reinforcement from the board to accomplish this goal, but accomplishment will be impossible without adequate funds. Now, if we can be successful in our performance measures and the state stands by its commitment, then I know we can accomplish the goal that all of you want to see happen, and that's to bring these averages up. But there's a direct relationship, and you know, why not say it directly? The fact of the matter is, if we don't perform as the state says, the money won't be there. Now, some of you work hard at all tasks outlined in this criteria, but let's be honest, some of you don't. I don't know who does and who doesn't. Now, I have a young, he's not so young anymore, but he's my youngest kid, living in my house. I'm going to tell a little story here. I was told not to tell it, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I told it this morning to the staff. Now, I hope this is only one person at this institution, and no one else would have done this. But if this is what happens, this is what kills us in this perception data. Needed help, went to the faculty's office, walked into the office. The faculty person said, yes, I can help you, got to make a phone call. Stayed on the phone for 45 minutes, left the kid standing there. When they got finished, hung up the phone, told the kid, sorry, I don't have enough time now, come back, make an appointment. Now, I don't care if it was my kid or anybody else. I don't know who it was, by the way, I didn't ask. We keep our things pretty well tight to the belt. So I'm telling all you, he'd probably shoot me if he knew I told you. But that's wrong. That's just wrong. And if we got that attitude with a secretary, with a faculty member, with anybody else at this institution, then we don't deserve to be funded. I read an interesting essay in Higher Education on a collision course with new realities by David Brenneman from Harvard University. I want to encourage you to begin reading in your profession, not just your discipline, but in your profession. While no one knows for sure, there seems to be a national consensus developing that even if the economy improves, we will not see higher education return to the days it enjoyed financially for the past 2 decades. I talk regularly with college presidents, and it's clear to them and it's clear to me that the challenges we face will not be solved on the income side of our budget, but rather on the expenditure side. There's not going to be a new influx of money here. It's what we do with what we have and making choices about what we want to accomplish. Now, across-the-board cuts, while preferable but many times by staff and faculty, will not serve our institution well in the long term. Therefore, I will be making recommendations to the board that represent the work of our task force and the ad hoc planning committee. I haven't got their report yet, but I do know that the Senate is working on it, and I will take it seriously. I know that all of you have worked hard, but your work's not over in terms of giving guidance on these issues. There are a few topics that I will refer to task forces that were not covered earlier. And also, I am waiting for the committee report before I report to the faculty at large and finally to our board. But there's one issue I do want to discuss with this faculty. Because of what I learned at the NCAA meeting, I'm ready to submit a recommendation about athletics. I am convinced that our athletic program is on a collision course not unlike other athletic programs in the country with the national movement towards gender equity. I feel we should be a leader in accomplishing this gender equity issue in this country and in this state. In the fiscal year 1992-93, we spent $1,354,419 on men's sports. During that same period, we spent $409,325 on women's sports, for a ratio of 77% for men, 23% for women. It's my goal to bring this to parity in the next 3 years. Therefore, I plan to recommend that the Board of Trustees in February give me the authority to approach the OVC and to begin the process of bringing our football program to a non-scholarship level beginning in the fall of 1995 and becoming a full non-scholarship program by 1998. The $766,744 direct budget of football will be reduced, and the savings will be used to improve other sports, especially women's sports, and reduce our dependence on general funds. In my opinion, we'll be able to compete within the OVC and our other sports and in a new football league that will have non-scholarship programs. It's only right to be as demanding of our athletic program as we have been with our academic program. Of course, such a change will take the blessing of the Board of Regents. You know, we're faced with a future that's hard to predict, and as your CEO, I readily admit that I don't have a clear crystal ball. However, I know educationally that we are challenged to instruct, to train, to prepare for a future with different assumptions that you and I grew up in, different relationships than you and I grew up in, and different conditions that you and I grew up in. Our rules of the past, I don't think, will serve us well in the future. But as your CEO, I do have some advice. And the advice I have for you is a rededication, really, to our noblest goals of our profession. Had the opportunity to do a lot of reading over the break, but I stumbled upon a book that's only about this thick, but what a powerhouse it was as I read it and put it into the context of everything else I had been reading. It's called An American Imperative, Higher Expectations for Higher Education, published in 1993. And I agree what they talked about are crucial issues for higher education as we approach the 21st century. They had three basic questions in here. The three basic questions just really were kind of an overall thought process, but then they gave some specifics. Let me talk first about the three overall questions. And they're really kind of questions that each one of us have to answer. There is no correct answer. These really would bring about a debate, probably a healthy debate, among all of us. The first, what kind of people do we want our children and grandchildren to be? I mean, what kind of a person do you want your son or daughter to be, or your grandson or your granddaughter to be? That was one question. Secondly, what kind of society do we want them to live in? You know, we're very fortunate here. We, in a way, are really hidden away from the mainstream of society in a very positive way. The only thing that brings the reality of the world to us is possibly our televisions and our newspapers. All of us still have the luxury of knowing that our streets are relatively safe and that we are hidden from all the ills that many of our urban areas have. But yet, many of our students who leave here will go to other settings, will be involved, will set the rules or regulations and everything else that will govern us in our older age and certainly throughout their lifetimes. It's frightening to me to realize that a student we bring in right now will spend all their workforce time in the 21st century. We'll be thinking about retirement. They're thinking about life. So what kind of society do we want them to live in? Second question. And the last question that was in that report is, how can we, higher education, in this particular case Morehead State, best shape our institution to nurture the kinds of people that can affect the kind of society that we want? Now, these are value-laden questions, and I said there is no answer, and probably we would all disagree, but maybe even in discourse of disagreement, we would find at least some common ground where we could agree. Not only for our individual, but also as our institution, and hopefully for this country. I believe we have had a decline in undergraduate education. I don't think our students do as well as they have in the past. I don't think they necessarily think the way some of us thought when we came forth to higher education. But I do believe that we must, for the foreseeable future, focus our attention, all of us, focus our attention on what students learn and achieve. Students need to be at the heart of what we do. We must expect more from our students and more from ourselves by doing a better job of helping them reach these expectations. You know, when I say that sentence, it sounds so clear. I'll read it again. We must expect more from our students and more from ourselves by doing a better job of helping students reach our expectations. To some of you, that's very simple. I'll just ask them to do more. But that's not the answer. It's not the answer by a long shot. The following points I want to present to you, I've paraphrased from that aforementioned report. I think you all have a copy of them that was attached to the back of the mission statement. I want to go through these one at a time, but I would hope that you would leave here today and tack them on your bulletin board or tack them in your office somewhere. And read them. But more than read them, understand them. Now, I've placed these in I will statements because you've all heard me talk that when you say I will, you're more apt to do than if it's just something esoteric sitting up there and completely divorced from your own mind process. But I truly believe that these 7 points can incorporate what I mean when I say expect more from our students and more of ourselves. Number 1, understand our mission and understand the students we serve. Yes, it's a diverse population, but there are some common points among our students. All of you know that they're not overly sophisticated. All of you know that there have been some cultural points missing in their upbringing. I don't want to make social psychologists out of all of you, but all of you know enough about social psychology to truly understand where our students are coming from, how they tend to behave. We need to know that in the context of our mission, each one of us. Define what our entering students need to succeed. I'm going to tell you. You saw the statistic in terms of their high school preparation. All of us know that intellectually they come without everything they need. We know that. But there are other things they don't have too that can be equally important in terms of keeping them and helping them become positive and persons who succeed at this institution. If you relate to these students only on intellectual measures, you will lose a great portion of them that unfortunately we cannot afford to lose in this society. It's more than an intellectual message here. It's also a social and a social psychology message of understanding. And believe me, I'm at sea at how some of our students think. I mean, I am. But yet, I hope I can take the wisdom of my 53 years and help them become more responsible, more attentive, to help them achieve and be successful. 3, start from where they are, not from where you think they should be, but from where they are. And help them achieve explicitly stated standards for the achievement. The very first speech I gave here got paraphrased and got twisted and this, that, and the other, and it made me sound like some conservative ninny who said, we're just too dumb to do that. When I started talking about hats, which is nothing more than a flippant remark that I made. But it did reflect something. If you tell students what you expect, you're more apt to get them there. But that's not all you have to do. You know that and I know that. As your president, I try to set conditions for you to have the best workplace we can possibly afford, the most open one we can possibly have. But all I can do is set the conditions. The other side has to come from you. Well, the same is true with students in your class. They have to put forth too. But how do we help them do it? And I think we have to have conversations among ourselves of how do we accomplish that with the kids that we have coming here. 4th, tailor programs, curriculum schedules, support services, office hours to meet the need of the student and not for our own convenience. We're here 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We open at 8:30 in the morning and many of us close at 4:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. I think we have to look at that in all of our departments, in our own department, in the president's office, everywhere, is how can we best get at these kids to help them be successful. And I would hope you would discuss those things in your department meetings. Number 5, systematically apply the very best of what is known about learning and teaching. Now, Mac Lucky's been preaching this for so long, haven't you, Mac? That's been one of your statements, and you have a lot of followers. Most of us started school in the 50s. I can walk into some of our classrooms today, shut my eyes, and be transported back 30 plus years. Nothing has changed. Now, at the very same time, since 1958 when I started college, if I asked each one of you to write down on a sheet of paper everything that has happened in this world that has affected how you think, how you work, conveniences, and this, that, and the other, each one of you would have a list, 30, 40, maybe 50 items. Everything from food, transportation, computers, even we had secretaries in here this morning. I said, 10 years ago, if I said I needed 10 copies of something, what would you do? I'd run the mimeograph machine. I mean, times have changed. We better change with it. And if you can't change, then I say, let's use some of our money to help you change, to help you know what's on the cutting edge of your discipline in terms of enhancing student success. This is not a place to show how bright we are. I mean, hell, the students think that already, whether it's deserved or not. Our job is to teach them to have self-confidence and to achieve, not to have a place where we can show off our intelligence. There's not one of you who is not smarter in your discipline than any student who comes here. I'm not saying brighter, I'm just saying smarter. I've heard, I hear it, just like everyone else, well, we can't do anything different, we got too many kids. Well, maybe we do, maybe there's a way around that. But we got to start talking about it. Let's get the best we know about learning into our teaching. And 6, assess what students know and are able to do in order to improve both the student and the institutional performance. We can't be afraid of assessment. And those are topics that everyone, in some of our disciplines maybe it's a little easier than others. Maybe in music, Chris, maybe you can come in and they can, blow 20 notes in a row and maybe make one error, and maybe you can get them to 40 notes in one error, maybe you can get them perfect. But that's not true in all of our subjects. But we need to talk about it. How can we assess and help students move along? And then the last one, to develop and publish explicit standards in order to grant degrees to students. How many times have we been criticized when a student stands up and says, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or demonstrates they can't do it, and we've given them a degree? That's our fault. That literally is our fault if we gave the degree to them, because we're certifying that they can do these things. And so I think that, again, what we expect should be explicit in there. Now, I don't mean to be a preacher. Maybe I've got some latent desire to do that somewhere in my life. But the fact of the matter is, we are going to be judged on how people perform. And we're going to have to look at ourselves and our profession. And I want us to be on the cutting edge of that. Not on the standing back and saying, oh, that's all going to go away, because it's not going to go away. It's going to be with us. And you know something? It's the right thing for us to do in our profession. Now, for an ending, let me return to my beginning. We do have control over our relative financial or fiscal standing by understanding performance-based funding, and I hope that if you don't get enough out of this, you'll get the whole report, look at it, and see how you can play a part in being positive. I believe these aforementioned 7 points that you have in your hands would be helpful, and I hope you put them up on your wall and look at them in terms of how you can use them. I've said in every speech that I've given to you that as your president, I can only set the conditions for you to do the wonderful things that you're capable of doing as teachers and researchers and what have you. Our key to success is really our collective effort. It's not just you alone. It's the faculty, it's the staff, it's the administration, it's the board, and it's the students. And every time I get a chance, I go into student organizations and I say, I don't give a damn, pardon my French, I don't care about your parking conditions. Are you learning? Are you succeeding? Are you being responsible? I have a lot less frivolity come to my office because of that, because they know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about not creature comforts. I'm going to talk about them being successful, because that's what's important here, not whether they have a bowling alley with 10 lanes as opposed to 5. Our key to success is our collective effort. Higher education is at a critical point, and I think not only in this state but in this country, and I think at this institution. We must be willing, in my opinion, to change and be accountable for everything we do, because I don't think if we don't do it, I think it'll be made by, decisions will be made by other people. I think it'll be taken out of our hands. Now, I have some positives to share with you. I don't want this to be gloom and doom. There are some real positives, and you know, you deserve a lot of accolades for what you do, and you have that within me. I hope this hasn't come across too harsh. We, on December the 27th, had the largest single testimony in terms of a gift to this institution from an individual that we've ever had. $1 million. $250,000 of it came this January 1, and we'll get $250,000 every January 1 for the next 3, for a total of $1 million. We've had other institutions that have never given us anything make gifts as high as $50,000 to us because they believe in us. We have sitting out there by the way, that gift for $1 million was had 2 parts to it. One, we will name the College of Humanities, or I will recommend to the board that we name the College of Humanities the Caudle College of Humanities. While the first $1 million is to create a endowment for the fine arts, the family and individuals are dedicating themselves for us to collect another $2 million to endow the entire college and not just the fine arts portion of that college. We have about a $320,000 gift out there on the wings that we think we're going to be successful on, and hopefully I'll be able to announce to you sometime in April. And that $350,000 will be to create an endowment within the College of Education, specifically for science education. So I am encouraged that we have people out there willing to give these sorts of sums, and I think we've just started to put the water and prime the pump in terms of private dollars coming into this institution. And that's a testimony to you, not to me, to you, because you are the longtime spirit of this institution. I'm a newcomer. Now, I have tried to create an open campus here in terms of communication, where we can all share in the influence of decisions through the Staff Congress and through the Faculty Senate. From what I said in the beginning, I hope that all of us will continue to be honest, say what we mean, and keep it simple. And if we do that, I think we'll continue to have a positive workplace. You know, to me, when one is working, if you feel good about what you accomplished in that day and you want to come back the next day, I can't think of anything else more positive in life, at least in terms of work. And I think that's shared by almost everybody in this room. You like what you do and you want to come back the next day. Now, certainly there's days that you're disappointed, and but on the main, we want to come back. Well, I think that we can take that energy and fold it into what's going to be expected of us and benefit from it. I'm proud to work here. I'm proud to be your CEO. And the only thing I can say to you is we can do better, we will do better, and I wish you good luck in this. Thank you.
Well, after all of these years, I still like what I do, and I still enjoy getting up and coming to work. The President, of course, has set the stage, set the conditions for some significant challenges for us in the immediate future and in the long run as well. I can tell you that this semester already shapes up as being a very, very busy semester. All of you will be involved in a number of initiatives that are just now beginning or somewhat underway in terms of policies and practices at the university. But that's the nitty-gritty of it all. The big picture, of course, is that our destiny is in our hands, and I think that's really what succinctly the President was trying to tell us. Before we adjourn, are there any announcements that need to be made at this time by any of our chairs or deans or anyone in the audience? Dr. In this room or? Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
He was calling a departmental meeting for music, so you don't have to attend that.
You're welcome to the communications meeting, correct?
Did everyone hear that? I hope. The President has laid a lot of information at your feet today, and he's quite willing to stay behind and talk further with any of you that might like to talk with him. Those of you that would like to do that, please linger behind for that purpose. If you have other appointments or department meetings or what have you to go to, we will now adjourn officially for you either to go to your meetings or to stay behind for the President.